Well, this is a first. Here we have new footage of Ukrainian bomber drones taking off of unmanned surface vessels in the Black Sea to hammer Russian targets in Crimea. Now, the footage itself is pretty crazy, and we're actually fortunate today to have one of the planners of this operation to talk us through it. So let's turn to Horus, the intelligence officer for the Ukrainian 73rd Naval Special Operations Center, to describe in his own words this groundbreaking mission.
A few days from our success operation in Crimea, I can speak in a little bit about that. So from first to second data of that month, we, with special task unit from National Guard in Ukraine, we have a joint mission in Crimea. We're using our boat. It's a USV. We put in the bomber drones on that boat and going to Crimea, to Tarkhankut area. Previously, my intel unit few months is working on targeting process on radar NIBO-M. We definitely knowing everything about the target, and we definitely knowing where they standing, where each component of that radar standing. We send our boat. After that, bomber drones fly from our boat, go to the target and blow up that. So we blow up the long-range radar, medium-range radar, and the C2 node from that complex. General, so only one long-range radar cost $100 million approximately. Together, maybe up to $200 million we have a success. Both hundreds and hundreds times cheapest than that.
So I feel like that's drone warfare in a nutshell, right? Some innovative new tactic takes out old, expensive equipment for a fraction of the cost. It's like that story over and over and over and over again. Now, interesting little aspect here. I actually got the chance to talk with Horus twice. The first time we recorded this, he told me about this specific operation, but then his chain of command came back and said, not yet. Actually, that one not for public disclosure. So he just came back a couple days ago and said, actually, now it's okay to put that out there. And I'm excited to do it because this is a pretty wild operation. Now, part of what caught my attention in this conversation with Horus was when he was mentioning the use of bomber drones. And we've seen a lot of footage, some just today, of Ukraine using their first-person view or FPV strike drones against targets, especially in Crimea. So I asked, why bombers instead of FPVs? And the answer was actually pretty simple. Here we go.
So in our center from whole war, from 2022, starting work with the bomber drones. And we have a pretty big experience in that. But drones, what we use in be different like drone what we use in that operation. But we knowing all details how using a bomber drones and how combine that type of drone with another. And when we start working with USV, we starting thinking about bomber drones. Because when we start developing that boat, in Ukraine we haven't any success mission with FPV from USV. We don't know anything about it. So we're starting our project, not FPV, but bomber drones. FPV, our GUR forces or SBU forces, I don't know directly, but they using most quickly than we. But after them, we're using our case of how we can use and combining flight UAV and USV on the sea.
So I feel like that's an aspect that we often overlook and think that a drone is a drone is a drone. But realistically, all of these units have different operators, and those operators are comfortable on different types of systems where they've seen success in the past. So in this particular case, the 73rd and the other units they carried out this mission with felt most confident moving forward with bomber drones. I would expect that we're probably going to see FPVs used in a similar fashion, but This also speaks to kind of the consolidation in Ukraine, where we see the unmanned systems forces becoming their own distinct unit. There's probably going to be more cross-leveling of capabilities and pilot comfort levels across those different units. Now, another big aspect here was we've seen a lot of Ukrainian attacks in Crimea over the course of the last couple of years, and they've almost all been carried out with long-range missiles, say ATACMS or Storm Shadows, Scalp type cruise missiles. In this case, it's drones. So I asked him, why drones here instead of missiles? Is it that the Russians are actually looking for the missiles and the drones are able to kind of sneak under the radar? Here we go.
Yeah, smaller drone, it's most difficult to find. So if you're generally speaking about enemy SAM system, radar, so they making for finding and engaging the missiles, planes, but they don't make anything of that against drones. And about Coast Guard system like a BAL or Bastion, it's a Russian Coast Guard missile system. They build up against the ships or big boats, but not from against a small boat who carry a few of bomber drones. So defense not ready for that drone war. Some of them, yeah, they modified, they learning on the mistakes, but in a general, they haven't a big decision against that. And if you using your head and pretty smart planning your operation and trying to put more technology in your working process. I'm not only speaking about the drones, it's also about intelligence and another whole component of planning and doing the operation. You can have success.
So really cool, of course, to hear from Horus, from the 73rd, from one of the guys that planned this operation, exactly what they did and why they did it. Now, this specific interview was part of a fundraiser we were doing for Ukraine Aid Operations, where they actually sourced a couple Mavic thermal drones to the 73rd just a couple days ago, and right about the time this interview came out, they sent over a thank you video, so let's give that a quick listen.
Бійці 73-го центру ССО дякують за допомогу у вигляді тепловізійних дронів волонтерам благодійного фонду UAO. Окрема подяка YouTube-каналу Стюарта Престона за проведений збір коштів для нашого підрозділу. Слава Україні! Героям слава!
Now, I wish I could say that those thermal drones we sent over that you all provided funds for were used in that Crimea operation. Timing didn't exactly line up, but who knows? Maybe the next one around they'll actually be using some of those drones that we helped send their way. Now, there's some pretty interesting footage that just came out earlier today from the Freedom of Russia Legion that I wanted to share with you all. The Freedom of Russia Legion is a group of Russians. A handful of them are Russian soldiers that defected early in the war, and they've also done recruiting drives amongst POWs. So when Russians are captured by Ukrainian forces, in some cases, they're given the opportunity to stay in Ukraine and fight with the Freedom of Russia Legion or the Russian Volunteer Corps, fighting back against Russia. Now, these are groups that want to see the fall of the Putin regime. They want to see a more free, more representative Russia. They're, at this point, fighting alongside Ukraine. They share a lot of similar objectives. But again, big picture, this unit and a couple others are more focused on changing the situation in Russia itself. Nonetheless, haven't heard a lot from the Freedom of Russia Legion in recent months. They've done some cross-border raids into Belgorod over the course of the last couple of years, but they've generally been silent until now. It looks like they just kicked off a raid 30 kilometers into occupied territory in Zaporizhia. This is some of the footage they shared from that strike. Let's give it a quick watch. All right, so I'll link this video in the description below if you want to check it out in its entirety. They've got some pretty loud music overplay and everything here. But what it looks like, or what their claim is that this is footage moving 30 kilometers behind the front lines in the south, near Zaporizhia. And an interesting aspect here is that we're going to shift over to a Russian perspective later in today's video, where they say this area, the southern front, is actually where they think Ukraine might try to carry something out significant in the next couple of months. So specifically, the Freedom of Russia Legion here said that they were targeting Akhmat fighters. About that? So the Chechens. So they identified a couple of them here, were able to kill 3 of them and destroy a vehicle with an IED. And you'll see that blast here in a moment. Pretty clear this was an IED detonation. Surprising how close they were when this thing was triggered, and they didn't want to be any further away. I mean, you can be a lot further back and still get that on film. Nonetheless, they said that all of their fighters were able to safely evacuate back to Ukrainian lines after this operation was carried out. So it'll be interesting to see in coming days, weeks, and months if there's more activity from the Freedom of Russia Legion, for one, the Russian Volunteer Corps, for two, and if we see an uptick in Ukrainian activity, especially like this, behind Russian lines in the south. Now, overnight, after General Kellogg left, the U.S. envoy to Ukraine, who got to Ukraine, and all of a sudden we saw just a complete stop of Russian long-range drone and missile strikes against population centers, and there were some memes and jokes floating around that he was the new air defense system, that Russia was so concerned about carrying out strikes in Ukraine when a senior U.S. diplomat was there that just send General Kellogg over and over and over again. That might do the trick.
General Kellogg arrived in Ukraine, and there were no massive bombings for 2 nights in a row. This is a very interesting example. There were no heavy attacks this night and the previous night. Even people are already joking about it, saying that we should give General Kellogg a Ukrainian passport and leave him here, and that Americans should come to us more often, because then Russia would bomb less.
He left, and as could be expected, as a lot of people kind of predicted here, the Russian strikes picked right back up. So overnight, we saw 379 munitions utilized against Ukraine. That included 344 strike UAVs, Shahed-style drones. Handful of those were decoys, and then 25 missiles. According to Ukrainian sources, they say hits were recorded, as in impacts, targets were hit, by 5 missiles and 30 strike UAVs in 12 locations, as well as 7 locations where drones were shot down and caused damage once they hit the ground. Now, according to Ukrainian President Zelensky, he said during the course of this strike, 6 people were injured, including 1 child, and unfortunately, as of this report, 1 person was killed. He said, "Thank you to all of the leaders who understand how important it is to promptly implement our agreements, joint weapons production, investments in drone manufacturing in Ukraine, including interceptor drones, providing air defense systems and missiles for them, as well as the possibility of producing them here in Ukraine. All of this saves lives and is needed by Ukraine right now." And on that note, we're seeing the first moves, really, since President Trump announced on Monday that the United States would be continuing aid to Ukraine. And some, there's some caveats there. We're going to be selling it to our European partners. It looks like the first steps in that direction were just taken. Now, this is according to some reporting by the Wall Street Journal, where they say the United States will send its next Patriot air defense system to Germany rather than Switzerland in order to speed up Berlin's promised delivery of 2 Patriot batteries to Ukraine. This was reported by the Wall Street Journal yesterday, July 18th. They say the reports came a day after the Swiss Defense Ministry announced that expected deliveries of U.S. Patriots would be delayed due to the U.S. State Department's decision to prioritize Ukraine. And that's one of the biggest aspects here, is not just that we're saying we are open and willing to sell more equipment to our European partners, which isn't necessarily like a big change at all. The prioritization of equipment going to Ukraine is a significant shift. The article says Washington will instead deliver the next Patriot system off the production line to Germany to replace 2 Patriots from its own arsenal that Berlin will ship to Kyiv. Notably there, one of the concerns when I was reporting on this a couple days ago is if we offer up, as I think we should, our partners to purchase U.S. military equipment, they have sent a lot of things already to Ukraine. So there is no guarantee that in this specific case, Germany purchases the Patriots and automatically sends others to Ukraine. They might need to backfill some of their own stock, like we are here in the United States. However, in this particular instance, it looks like Germany is receiving the 2 new systems in exchange for the 2 existing systems that they are in the process now of shipping to Kyiv. Now, the Wall Street Journal did not list an expected delivery date for the German systems to arrive in Ukraine and did not have an expected delivery date of when the systems would arrive from the United States in Germany. But nonetheless, they say this move does mark the first time the Pentagon has facilitated weapons deliveries to Ukraine since U.S. President Donald Trump said on July 7th that he supported additional military aid. It's a big change. And yesterday we reported on a pretty interesting poll showing that as soon as some in Trump's base saw that he was on board with providing weapons to Ukraine, that a lot of people were right behind him and said, great, let's do it. Something like 62% support all of a sudden, which is one of the highest levels we've seen since the early days of the war back in 2022. It'd be nice to see if we can kind of ride that wave and get some more aid sent over in the near term, as Ukraine needs it right now. Now, there was some of this kind of mixed up in some news out of Washington, D.C. yesterday, where this is important, but I think it was a little bit misrepresented. There was a bill, a defense appropriations bill, passed through Congress on Friday, which was not unexpected. It's a big one, $832 billion, and it was not dedicated to Ukraine. In fact, there was nothing in there specifically dedicated to Ukraine, but Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene added an amendment saying that it would prohibit any funding in the bill from being used for Ukraine in the future. And that was voted down, 353 to 76. Notably, that was largely symbolic. Again, there wasn't anything in here that included aid to Ukraine in the first place. But what this did do, in terms of a positive note, is that it suggests while direct appropriations were not included in this bill, the path for potential future aid remains open, as does the possibility that aspects from within this bill, things that are procured within this bill, if 6, 12, 18, 36 months down the road, we decide that they may be better utilized by Ukraine and we are going to buy some more for ourselves, in this case, that would be authorized. So symbolic vote, nonetheless, an important one. Now, turning to a Russian perspective here, our favorite Russian doom poster, Igor Girkin, is back publishing content where he said, in the near future, that is until the end of summer, I expect the enemy to become more active in the southern direction. We've already discussed this more than once. Our offensive is practically halted, and now it's the enemy's turn. Unfortunately, this move is inevitable. Let us hope that our intelligence will detect it in time, or has already detected it, and that there will be enough forces to repel it. I assume that this move will be made in the Kherson and Crimean directions. Everything is headed that way. By some signs, it can be predicted that the enemy is holding back both their drones and their missiles, apparently preparing for another massive drone strike as part of their planned offensive. Let us hope that it will be possible to repel it just as we did in 2023, when the enemy tried to break through our positions in the Zaporizhia direction. Mixed there. Wouldn't be surprised for Ukraine to carry out some more deep, long-range strikes. The idea that Ukraine is on the verge of carrying out a 2023-style offensive operation into the south is a little bit hard to believe right now. It's not just for, to be blunt, the lack of manpower and the shortage of equipment in recent months as aid deliveries have slowed, but I don't know exactly what the objective would be there. Russia has continued to build up and reinforce their positions in the south. Ukraine does not have a manpower advantage. They do not really have a maneuver warfare advantage. If anything, their advantage is on attriting Russian forces as the Russians try to continually advance all across the front. And in that regard, Ukraine is doing a pretty good job. There were some reports a couple days ago coming from the July 4th call between President Trump and President Zelensky, where depending on the context, it may have been interpreted that President Trump was asking Zelensky to go on the offensive, saying you can't win this by staying on the defensive the entire time. Very similar to 2023. I don't think there's a good case for Ukraine to do that right now. That same report was kind of suggested to mean maybe Ukraine could carry out some longer range drone and missile strikes against key targets, maybe in and around the Kremlin, in Moscow, maybe St. Petersburg. That seems much more likely, but seeing Ukraine take the manpower they have right now and charge out from the trenches, move forward across no man's land, try to brave the Russian drone strikes and minefields, I just don't see that being a winning proposition right now. So I got it. Gherkin's concerned. Maybe we'll see some more small-scale raids like the Freedom of Russian Legion just carried out a couple days ago. Not entirely unlikely we see some sort of counterattacks around Pokrovsk especially, but in terms of a large-scale offensive similar to 2023, I wouldn't bank on that right now. It just doesn't make a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons. But nonetheless, that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.